Hello friends, it's Leica Day. Today the Leica Q3 was announced. I have used all of the Q bodies. I own and adore my Leica Q2 here. And after using the Q3 for a few days last month, I can say that the Q3 is a big step for Leica. It is significantly more flexible than its predecessors, and it has a few features that no other Leica has. And of course, no surprise, the output from the camera is phenomenal. Let's take a look at the camera. Then I will share my day of photography with this beauty and what you really need to know about it. First, a quick primer on the Q line of cameras. They are all mirrorless, full frame, fixed lens, fixed focal length cameras with macro capability. Breaking that down a bit, the Q cameras each have a full frame sensor. The lens on the camera is fixed, meaning that you can't take it off. And that lens is a 28mm f1.7 Summilux with macro capability. And it's in a compact but very robust metal body. I love the Q line for how pleasurable it is to use, including the haptics, like the aperture ring, and how easy it is to switch over to macro and even manually focus if you want. It just feels good in the hand. But I also appreciate the results I get. The lens on the camera is stupendous, and you achieve the Leica colors that you expect. And while we're discussing what I like about Leica, including the Q cameras, the beauty of the cameras themselves is absolutely a draw for me. As you can see, I keep my gear out on display back there, and my Leica section is simply the prettiest. All right, let's look at some results. I started out with the camera in the Sonoran Desert near Phoenix, Arizona for sunrise. The weather was absolutely beautiful on this spring morning, but the sunrise itself was kinda boring. There were almost no clouds in the sky, but the Q3 sensor, which is a different sensor from the Q2, it has 60 megapixels where the Q2 had 47. I'll come back to why the increase in number of pixels is noteworthy, but the sensor itself, along with the firmware that interprets the information, provides you with a beautifully soft transition of colors and from light to shadow. You can see that in these photos captured just prior to sunrise. Even though there are no clouds in the sky to diffuse the light or to create the crazy desert sunrises that we are known for here, the sky still looks lovely. This is something that is often the case with Leica cameras and Leica lenses. As the sun is starting to come up, a few clouds, well, this is actually probably pollution, but it basically provides the same effect. We still see the gentle gradation of colors and the glowing effect of the sun. These characteristics aren't exclusive to Leica, but it's not common across all brands. Leica can be counted on for their depiction of color and light, even in difficult circumstances like this one. In this photo, I made use of two of the features of the Q3 that I wanted to talk about today. The macro feature, which has been around since the original Q camera, but also the flip screen, which is new to the Q3. This was a low angle shot. I had the camera nearly placed on the ground. So flipping the screen up so that I could see it made things a ton easier. In fact, I wouldn't have been able to capture this otherwise because I have a back injury and I am not as mobile as I usually am. By the time you see this video, I will have had my second spine surgery this year. Keep your fingers crossed that this one will do the trick for me. And the flip screen on the Q3 is a first for Leica. It is one of the features that makes the Q3 more flexible than the previous Q cameras. However, it does interrupt the aesthetics of the camera body. Another thing that interferes with the clean lines of this camera is the door covering the two ports on the side. We have a micro HDMI port here and a USB-C charging port. Both of those are new to the Q3, and they do make it more flexible than its predecessors. But like I said before, I truly value the industrial design of Leica cameras, and it's a little bit disappointing to me to lose that clean look like I have here on my Q2. Now, this will absolutely not bother everyone, and the trade-off of flexibility for slightly less clean lines on the camera is probably a trade-off that a lot of folks would be happy to make. If we compare the Q3 to any other brand, the Q3 does still have cleaner lines. The only cameras on the market approaching the capability and niche of the Q3 with a cleaner industrial design are the Q and the Q2. The saguaro cactuses were in bloom in the desert, which is such a treat. However, the lens on the Q3 is a 28mm lens. What's a girl to do to capture those beautiful blooms? Well, I'm not going to be able to get super up close to them, but I do have some flexibility here. The Q3 has an in-camera digital zoom that enables you to visualize your framing in the electronic viewfinder or on the rear LCD screen. The virtual focal lengths are 35, 50, 75, and 90 millimeters. That 90 millimeter is an addition thanks to the increased number of pixels on the sensor. The Q2 here topped out at 75 millimeters. To be clear, when we're using these additional focal lengths, it is a crop, but there's no upscaling or other trickery. And it does give you the feeling in the field that you not only have a 28mm lens, but that you have 4 additional very high quality virtual lenses at your disposal. And incidentally, when you capture your images in JPEG, that crop will be baked into the file. It's stuck there. But when you capture your images in RAW, you retain access to the full 28mm file. Whichever type you use, it's a really handy feature, particularly for a camera with a fixed lens of a fixed focal length. Every time you step up to that next virtual focal length, you are using fewer pixels, but the Leica images are so clear and smooth, yet sharp, that I've never felt like using this option was a compromise. So the increase in megapixels allows for more cropping of images. And when you combine that with the macro capability of the camera, you end up with extra macro capability. Again, it's a crop, bringing me a much more up-close view of the cactus spines. The key is that I am getting the shot that I want in the field, not distracting myself from the experience of using this camera by saying, oh, I guess I will crop that later, I'll just have to remember. With the Q3, I can virtually change lenses and get the shot that I want at the moment of capture. This is what I mean by flexibility in the Q3. At first glance, it looks like a camera that has a 28mm lens and that's it, but that's not quite true. Like I said, you virtually have a few prime lenses with you, or even a zoom lens, if you will, just with really good clarity, and with macro capability. But one thing to note is that the Q2 has 47 megapixels. That's still a lot of pixels to work with and still provides beautiful results. The Q3 is also a sneaky little video beast. It has the capability to capture 10-bit 8K video at 30 frames per second to the SD card. You also have 4K at 60 frames per second, again 10-bit to the card. Those are some impressive specs. And guess what? That capability makes the Q3 even more flexible. For me, I publish my videos here on YouTube in 4K, but my videos to other platforms like Instagram and TikTok are 1080. So recording video in 8K means that I can crop into my video, either because the 28mm lens was too wide or because I just decided after the fact that I wanted a slightly different composition. And capturing video in 10-bit means more flexibility in adjusting exposure and color grading in post. And while the Q3 doesn't have in-body image stabilization, the optical stabilization is quite good. Let's jump to the evening in downtown Phoenix. This compact camera is perfect for street photography, and nighttime street photography sounds even better. And this camera does have quite good low light performance. Cameras these days are getting better and better at image quality at higher ISO sensitivities, for sure. And the Q3 is no exception. When I was briefed by my contact at Leica, I was told that when it came to noise, the engineers focused their attention on minimizing color noise. I was using aperture priority at f1.7 with auto ISO. There was a little bit of light in the sky when I first arrived downtown, but by the time I left, it was completely dark. And the highest ISO that the camera chose was 2500. Now I did underexpose my photos a bit by using exposure compensation. That way I retained the most detail in the lights, and I knew that I could bring shadows up in post-processing. And my finished product is beautiful. My point here is that between the optical stabilization in the lens, the stellar sensor, and the wide aperture available to you, I didn't even need to use the really high ISO sensitivities. I mean, it's great to have them, but in real life, I just wouldn't need it very often. One last thing I wanted to point out is the focusing system. The Q3 is the first Leica camera with hybrid contrast and phase detect autofocus. Now, Leica's contrast detect autofocus was actually quite good, but we all love a quicker and more accurate autofocus, right? And personally, I am all about having the autofocus super smarts. The Q3 did also add animal detection autofocus. Let's be clear, the Q3 isn't meant to be a dedicated sports and wildlife camera, but it is meant to be a flexible little camera that is ready for a wide variety of situations. Things like enhanced autofocus capabilities provide you with more in-focus photos in more situations. I realize that this video wasn't a comprehensive review of the Q3. There are undoubtedly other videos out there today that will go down the specs list and compare each of them to the previous Q models. My aim today is to tell you what you really need to know about the camera and to show you real life in the field results from outings with the camera. I revealed my conclusion at the beginning of this video. The Leica Q3 is a wonderful camera. It is significantly more flexible than its predecessor, the Q2. You do lose some of those traditional Leica camera body aesthetics. Whether or not that is important to you is a matter of personal preference. For me, I'm sticking with the Q2, but I wasn't excited to send back the Q3. I really enjoyed using it. And if I did not already own the Q2, I think I would ultimately go for the Q2 over the Q3, but I would labor over the decision. I don't think you can go wrong with either. I mean, maybe I would go with the Q3. I don't know. The Q line of cameras is my ideal therapy camera. For those times when I want to get out there and enjoy myself, but still come away with exceptional results. And the Q3 has come dangerously close to being an everyday camera for many different types of photography. Not a camera that is just relegated to being a therapy camera or to specific situations where a fixed lens thrives. It feels a lot like my Leica SL2 when I bring several prime lenses with me, but with the Q3, there's just one compact camera to bring. And that's all for today. Before you go though, let me know what you think. Does the Q3 entice you? It does seem to remedy many of the hesitations that I have heard from viewers about the Q system. Am I right? Let me know in the comments. Thank you to Leica for allowing me to borrow the Q3. It is always a pleasure to try out new Leica gear. And thank you for watching.